All right, everyone, we are going to start to review for our test that is approaching. The first thing I hope that you already did was completed your square root and cubed root table that I have listed. Remember, this table in green is for the squares when you find the area of a square, and the table in orange is when you find the volume of a cube. And remember, if you forgot how to do this, for example, to do the side length was 6. Remember, you do 6 times 6, which gives you 36, or side length to the second power. When you're cubing something or finding the volume of a cube, you would do your side length to the third power. So for example, if you were finding the volume when the edge length was 5, you would just do 5 to the third power, which is the same as 5 times 5 times 5. Remember, you need to memorize this table for your test. This is the no calculator portion. Down below it says to estimate to the nearest tens place. I want you to give that a shot right now. Try to use the tables right here. And I'll do the first one with you. I'm not going to scroll down there yet, so I'm just going to write it up here. So the first one asks you to find the square root of 177. Remember, 177, the square root of that, we're using this table. So 177 is in between 169 and 196. So 177 is going to be right in between here. It is closer to 169. So my answer is going to be closer to 13 than 14. It is definitely not halfway in between. So I'm going to estimate it to be about 13.3. If you would have said 13.2, 13.3, even 13.4, I would give you credit on your test. Let's try another one. So down there, another one on your sheet. I asked you to find the square root of 110. Well, I know 110 is in between 100 and 121. So I know if I take the square root of that, it's going to be in between 10 and 11. 110 is roughly halfway in between 100 and 121. So I'm going to go roughly halfway in between 10 and 11, which is at 10.5. If you would have said 10.4, 10.5, 10.6, I would have given it to you on the test. Let's look at one more of these. Let's do a cubed root. So if I asked you, one of them on there is to find the cubed root of 199. Well, 199 is in between 125 and 216, so I know I'm going to be in between 5 and 6. 199 is way closer to 216 than 125. So I'm going to go closer to 6. So I estimated it to be about 5.8. If you would have said 5.7, 5.8, even 5.9, yes, you would get credit on your test. So why don't you finish the rest of those below, and when you are ready to check your answers, you can press play. So pause your video, please. These are the answers that you should have, and like I said before, if you're roughly off by 0.1 in either direction, you'd still be good to go for the test. The cubed roots are in orange, and that reflects the table that I did in orange up here. And the square roots are in green. Make sure that you know the difference on your test. On your next page, you once again are going to be using the tables, and you're either stating the 2 consecutive whole numbers it's between, or finding the square root, or simplifying. I want you to give your next page a shot, and when you're ready to check your answers, you can press play. So, for example, if I ask you to find the 2 consecutive whole numbers that the square root of 180 is in between, well, 180 is in between 169 and 196, so I know my answer is going to be in between 13 and 14. Why don't you give the next page a shot right now, and press play when you are ready to check it. So check your answers. Remember, make sure you know the difference between the square roots in green, using that table, and the cubed roots in orange. Down below, when I asked you to determine the square root, you're literally doing the same thing, but it would be an exact value. Square roots are in green, cube roots are in orange. Remember, square roots, you think what multiplied by itself would give you 25, and in this case it's 5. When you get to the cube roots, you think what multiplied by itself 3 times would give you 8, and your answer would be 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. Down below, remember you're just simplifying. You're taking the square root of your numerator and the square root of your denominator. So the square root of 81 is 9. The square root of 9 in your denominator is 3. And yes, if you can simplify, please do that. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Next one. Square root of 36 is 6. The square root of 49 is 7. You cannot simplify that, so that is your answer. Square root of 100 is 10. Square root of 144 is 12. And yes, this can be simplified. We can divide both by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So if I just show you, we're dividing the numerator and denominator by 2 to simplify. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So 5, 6 should be your final answer. If you do not simplify it, yes, you will lose some points on your test. Alright, so that concludes the no calculator portion. So make sure you know how to do all of that without a calculator. Now we're into the calculator portion. So if I want to know the distance between those 2 points, remember all you're going to do is make it into a right triangle. Technically, you could draw it below, or I'll show you, you could have also drawn it in orange. It does not matter because you would get the same leg length. So let's just say that I'm using the one below. This leg is 2, this leg is 4. And then I apply the Pythagorean theorem, always finding your hypotenuse, because this is the side I'm missing, and it is opposite my 90-degree angle. So if I do 2 squared plus 4 squared, I'd get 20. And remember, your final step always is to take the square root, and it's 4.5. Remember, if it's not a whole number, round to the nearest tenths place. So 4.5 should be your answer. So for this next one, I want to draw a line segment that's the square root of 82 units apart. So I have to think what leg lengths would give me, and once I apply my Pythagorean theorem, would give me the square root of 82. So you're going to want to write down or have your table up. That's going to help you. So now I'm going to think down my area column. Well, 1 plus 81 gives me 82. So if that's the area, my leg lengths would have to be 1 and 9. So 1 and 9 is your answer for this one for your leg lengths. Technically, you cannot draw this on that grid because there's not enough dots to draw a leg of 9. Let's try this one. So draw a line segment that is the square root of 18 units apart. So first thing, I'm going to think about my side length area table. Just going to start to write some down. So if I continue this, the square root of 18, what 2 numbers add to give you 18? Well, in this case, the only 2 numbers in my area column would be 9. And if I double that, 9 plus 9 is 18. So my leg lengths would have to be 3. So 3 and 3 are my leg lengths. And then I can draw that anywhere on here. I have a leg of 3, another leg of 3, and then this diagonal would be the square root of 18. So make sure you know how to do that. Make sure you always are using your table. Alright, moving along to the next page, we want to know the length of the diagonal line. Remember, if it is a diagonal line, you can't just count the segments. You actually have to perform the Pythagorean theorem. So as always, draw a right triangle off of it. This leg is 1, and this leg is 4. Remember, when you are counting leg lengths, you count segments, not dots. And I'm finding the hypotenuse, so I add 1 squared plus 4 squared gives me 17. And remember, your final step is to always take the square root, and you would get roughly 4.1. for 5, you are going to do the same exact thing. So why don't you give 5, A and B a shot, and then when you are ready to check your answers, press play. So please pause the video now. So for line segment AB, which I have in the navy blue, your legs were 6 and 8, so you should have done 6 squared plus 8 squared, taken the square root to give you a final answer of 10. For line segment CD, your legs were 3 and 5, so here's my work over here, 3 squared plus 5 squared, and as always take the square root as your final step, and you would have had 5.8. Remember, anytime you're trying to find the length on a dot grid or on a coordinate grid, you always perform the Pythagorean theorem as if you were finding the hypotenuse. So for here, basically, we need to find our legs if our hypotenuse was the square root of 13. So as always, when you need to find the legs, think back to your side length area table. What two numbers in this column add because we were given the hypotenuse to give us 13? Well, your answer would be 4 plus 9 gives me 13. So my leg lengths that correspond with that are 2 and 3. So I know my legs, the answer would be 2 and 3. And starting at X, you could draw any right triangle with a leg of 2, and a leg of 3, and your diagonal is the square root of 13. Literally, your right triangle did not have to match as long as you had a leg of 2 and a leg of 3 somewhere on there coming off of point X. Can the following form a right triangle? Remember, you're just going to plug it into the formula. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. C, remember, is my largest value, which in this case, and it's usually the last one, which is the square root of 50. So over here I have to take the square root of 50 squared. On my right hand side I'm going to plug in my other values, 5 squared plus 5 squared. So 5 squared plus 5 squared gives you 50. And in my calculator, if I take the square root of 50 but then square it, the square root and the squaring cancel each other out. Or if you plugged it in your calculator like that, you would get 50. Since these both match up, yes, this would form a right triangle. Why don't you try to do B and C on your own, and then you can press play when you're ready to check your answers. So if you did this correctly, remember your largest value, the 25, was in place of your C. 15 squared plus 20 squared is 625. 25 squared is 625. Since both sides match up, yes, they would form a right triangle because it follows the rules for the Pythagorean theorem. Down below, 4 squared plus 7 squared is 67. 8 squared is 64. Since those numbers are not the same, no, those lengths would not form a right triangle. Okay, moving along, it said, Ken built the picture frame shown below. Which statement can be used to determine whether angle P is a right angle? So here's angle P, and they want to know if that's a right 90-degree angle. Well, remember, for it to be a right triangle or right angle, the Pythagorean theorem should work, which states a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If we look at our multiple choice options, A cannot work because they don't even have the squared symbol in there at all. And it doesn't say equals. B cannot work because it does not say equals. C cannot work because it does not say equals. D is the only one that works because they use the legs of 20 and 21, so 20 squared plus 21 squared equals the hypotenuse of 29 squared. Down below I already have some of the definitions typed in. So legs basically are the sides of a right triangle that form the 90-degree angle. Remember? Here's my 90-degree angle. So this side and this side are my legs. And remember, legs are considered the A and B in the formula. Your hypotenuse is your longest side, the side opposite your right angle, which is labeled with a C always. It never touches your 90-degree angle. The Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which is also on your formula sheet on your PSSAs. Number 12, if I gave you a square and the area was 81, to determine one of the side lengths, you could either think in your head, what times what gives you 81, or just take the square root of it. The square root of 81 is 9, so 9 is your answer. Please remember the Pythagorean theorem only works for right triangles. And explain what the b squared came from. The b squared is the area of the square from one of the legs. So if I would draw a square off of this side length of b, b squared is the area of that green square. So next we are going to find the lengths on your coordinate grid. Remember, as always, if I wanted to determine the lengths, I must draw a right triangle off of it and perform the Pythagorean theorem. This leg has a length of 3, this leg has a length of 4. So if I do 3 squared plus 4 squared, because we're finding the hypotenuse, I get 25. The square root of 25 is just 5. Number 16, same exact thing. Draw your right triangle off of it, and no, it does not matter if you would have put it above like I did in purple. Next step, count your legs. So this leg is 3, this leg is 5. 3 squared plus 5 squared would give me 34, and the square root of 34 to one decimal place is 5.8. Make sure you know how to do this. For number 16, ignore those ordered pairs. Basically, I want you to find the distance on that coordinate grid. So as always, draw your right triangle. Some of you have issues drawing your right triangles, but remember, you're just forming vertical and horizontal lines to form that 90-degree angle. So I have a leg of 4 here and a leg of 6 here. 4 squared plus 6 squared would give you 52, and the square root of 52 is roughly 7.2 if you did it correctly in your calculator. Down here, you're finding the length of the missing side. So for this first one, I'm finding x right here. Since it is touching my 90-degree angle, I'm looking for a leg. So I would do 20 squared minus 16 squared. Remember, when you're finding a leg, you always put your hypotenuse, the largest value, first. My answer would be 144, and your final step is to take the square root, so your answer would be 12 for the first one. For number 2, I'm looking for this side, which is opposite. It's not touching my 90-degree angle, so I'm looking for my hypotenuse. 6 squared plus 2.5 squared. My calculator would give me 42.25, and if I take the square root of that, I'll roughly get 6.5. Lastly, for this one, I'm looking for this side. Here's my 90-degree angle, so it touches it, so I'm looking for a leg. So take your largest value, your hypotenuse squared, minus 12 squared, and I would get 52. And the square root of 52 is roughly 7.2. Down below, I want to know if those 3 sides would form a right triangle or not. Plug it into the Pythagorean theorem. So put your legs first. 6 squared plus 8 squared. I want to know if it equals my longest side, which is my hypotenuse squared. 6 squared plus 8 squared gives me 100. On my right-hand side, 10 squared gives me 100. Since, yes, they are equal and they match up, yes, they would form a right triangle. Over here, if I do the same thing, 14 squared plus 16 squared, I want to know if it equals 18 squared. 14 squared plus 16 squared is 520. 18 squared is 324. Since 520 does not equal 324, no, they would not form a right triangle. Alright guys, on this page I want you to try it all on your own, and when you are ready to check your answers, you may press play, but right now pause your video and try it on your own. So if you're checking your answers, you should have had 5. This side that you were looking for was right here, and that's a leg because it's touching your 90-degree angle. That's why I subtracted. For number 2, we are looking for this side, which is opposite your 90-degree angle. Hypotenuse we add. For number 3, you were looking for this side, which touches your 90-degree angle. That's why we looked for a leg and we subtracted. And for number 4, I'm also looking for this side, which touches your 90-degree angle. So I'm looking for a leg and I subtracted. So for number 13, at the bottom of this page, you should have had, whoops, I made a mistake. Number 13 at the bottom of the page should have been no, because the left-hand side does not equal the right-hand side. So those 3 values would not form a right triangle. Over here we should have yes, because both sides are equal to 225. So these 3 values would form a right triangle. Therefore, it would have a 90-degree angle. Lastly, we're going to practice a few word problems. So a plane left New York City and flew east 413 miles to Toronto. So basically I'm going to say that dot's New York City and I'm going to fly east 413 miles. Then they flew south 800 miles to Atlanta. If the plane flew non-stop from New York City to Atlanta, how many miles would the plane fly? So I'm looking for this value, which is opposite, not touching my 90-degree angle, so I'm looking for my hypotenuse. So therefore I will add 413 squared plus 800 squared would give us 810,569, and if I take the square root of that, I'm going to have roughly 900.3 miles. Next one, a ladder is leaning against the house. So here's my pretty little house. In an arch, I'm going to draw my ladder. And it is leaning against a window that is 15 feet up the house. So my distance up the house is going to be 15 feet. The distance from the base of the house, which is right here, to the bottom of the ladder is 8 feet. How long is my ladder? I'm looking for my hypotenuse because I want to know the length of my ladder. So I would do 15 squared plus 8 squared. And I would get 289, and as always the square root is my final step, and I would get 17 as my answer, so 17 feet. Like I told you, drawing pictures is going to help you tremendously when you're answering these questions. Next one, we are talking about television. So let's say here's my television, and it says that they're measured in the length of their diagonal. So it says if a 70-inch TV, so if they're measured in the length of their diagonal, my diagonal is going to be 70 inches and has a height of 40 inches. What is the length of its base? So I want to know the length of its entire base, so that's my x. Here's my 90-degree angle, and my unknown side is touching it or forming it, so it's a leg. So I'm going to take 70 squared minus 40 squared. I'll get 3,300, and my final step is to take the square root, which is roughly 57.4 inches as my final answer. So, just to recap, there is a no calculator portion. Make sure you know your square root table, or your squared table, and your cube table. The first 2 pages of this review packet go with the no calculator portion. The rest of it, you are permitted to use a calculator. Remember, when you are trying to find the hypotenuse, you add. When you're trying to find a leg, you subtract. And no matter what, your final step is to always find the square root. If you have any questions, please make sure to ask your teacher, and study hard and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.